Stars are always popular for quilters to make blocks and quilts, and you can see a star in the background here. That one's a fairly large star, and it's made from diamonds. Diamonds are a little more difficult to sew together than half-square triangles, which is another way you can make a star. And so quilters have asked how to sew a star using diamonds. The difficulty is in using the set-in seams. And so today I've decided to show the Idaho star and make it out of diamonds, and you can see that the green spaces in here are going to require set-in seams. So you'll see exactly how to do that. This is Penny Hallgren from QuiltBlockLibrary.com and QuiltBlockLibrary.tv. Thanks for joining me, and I've got my pieces all cut out and ready to start. So let's go to the sewing machine. This Idaho star block is an 8-pointed star, like I pointed out, and it's got squares and triangles in between each one of the points. I chose my colors because Idaho's state butterfly is the monarch butterfly, so I decided that orange and yellow with a little bit of black and then green for the plants would be kind of cool. So the first thing I'm going to do is sew the center part together with the star, and I'm going to sew pairs of diamonds together. Now the one thing that's different about sewing stars than sewing other blocks is that you want to stop, especially because you've got this set-in seam, you want to stop 1/4 inch away from your ending point here, and I'm going to do a little back stitching here just to secure that seam in place. The other thing to watch for is to sew them together using putting the same color on top. The star points are all sewn together, and I've pressed the seam allowances facing the orange side, and now I've got 2 of these where the tips have been cut off, and so I'm just going to cut the tips off the other 2 sides. And this helps you see exactly where you're sewing, and in addition it relieves some of the bulk that's in the center of this quilt. So the next step is to sew these 2 halves together. So I'm going to flip these over so that once again I'm sewing with the yellow on top. These 2 halves of the stars are sewn together, and I've pressed the seam allowances, and I'm going to come in close here so you can see, because what I've done is press the seam allowances so that they go in a circle. And when I sew these together, they're going to just go all the way around in a circle. The next step is to sew these together, and by pressing the seam allowances in that direction, these 2 are going to have the seam allowances facing in opposite directions, and the center of your star is going to nestle down very nicely, and your seam allowances will lay as flat as they can. Once you've sewn your final seam down the center, then you're going to want to take it over to your ironing board and again press your seams so that they go in a circle. And what's interesting is that before you iron this down, you can open these seams, this center seam, so that it has this kind of interesting little star shape, but it allows the seam allowances to be folded in opposite directions through that center seam. And so you're going to want to press that with a steam iron. And then the thing I'm going to do is check, because on some of these seams, and I think this might be one of them, it looks like my ironing folds the seam allowance a little bit inside my stitching. And so I'm going to go back and stitch in that seam allowance just so that I'm sure that when I put my set-in seam, which could be a triangle or a square, that I'm setting it correctly and that my star is going to lay flat. Now that the center star is sewn together, it's time to add these pieces, and I'm going to start with this triangle on the corner, and I'm going to put this right sides together, match it up with this diamond here, and I'm going to start right here in the center and sew to the outside. Now that I've got this little triangle sewn on, I'm going to match these 2 seams, and it's going to mean that I'll fold this back, line everything up, put a pin in here, and then I'll be able to start stitching from where this ended down the side to the end of the diamond and the triangle. Now I've got the triangles sewn in, and it lays pretty flat, and what I'm going to do is press the seam allowance toward the triangle, and that's going to distribute all of this fabric, and it's going to lay relatively flat. So the next thing to do is add the next piece, and you can either do it across, or you can work around, you can do it however you want to, but the idea is just to add all of the squares and the triangles using the same process for set-in seams, and once you've finished doing all of those, then your star is finished. Now that this block is finished, I wanted to show you what the back looked like, and you can see that I've clipped off all the little tips here, as well as clipping the tips off in the center along the way. This block is finished, and it's ready to be put into a quilt. This is Penny Hallgren from quiltblocklibrary.com signing off, and if you're not already there, head on over to quiltblocklibrary.com and get your free download of this Idaho Star quilt block pattern. Until next time, peaceful piecing.